Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Junaid Tibshirani and today I'm joined by Massey University's Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Professor Paul Spoonley. It's great to have you here, Paul.
Thank you, Junaid.
Today we're going to tackle the topic of regional development, which Paul has edited a new book on, Rebooting the Regions. Paul, what is happening in the regions? Do you think it is true that we sort of have a two-speed economy in New Zealand, where we sort of have Auckland and maybe Christchurch versus the rest of the country?
Well, I think we probably have a three-speed economy, actually. Yes, Auckland is our growth point. So in population, economic, jobs growth, Auckland dominates, much larger than its size warrants. And then we've got some other centres that are doing okay, so Christchurch, but that's a rebuild, so it's very, very unusual. We've got some regions that are sort of doing okay, and then we've got some that are doing really badly. So Northland, the west coast of the South Island, the east coast of the North Island, are regions that are really beginning to struggle in economic terms, but also in population terms.
I mean, the sort of nature of New Zealand's ageing population really affects the makeup of the country and of our economic development. You know, how is this affecting New Zealand, the fact that our population is ageing and a lot of the ageing people are the people in the regions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people quite understand that our over 65 population is about to double. So it's becoming quite different to what it was in the past. So when I was growing up, you'd expect 10 to 12% of the population to be over 65. We've already got towns that have 30% of their population over the age of 65. And so that age group is becoming much more dominant. What compounds the problem, of course, is that in some regions the fertility is dropping and young people are leaving. So that ageing population becomes ever more dominant. And of course there are challenges in terms of providing them with services. So how do you provide a dementia ward in many regional rural parts of New Zealand? It's going to become an even greater issue in the future.
And actually, I mean, that's a really good point in terms of what to do with, some of these smaller places. They need that infrastructure, but that costs money, and that means, ratepayers might have to pay the bill, but the ratepayers are the people in the pensions which can't afford to pay that. So, do you think we almost need to give up on some small places?
Which places were you thinking of?
I'm not commenting.
We have done in the past. I mean, the history of New Zealand shows us that regions and places grow and die. So that's not unusual, but you're absolutely right. In many parts of the world, governments are beginning to try and keep people in particular parts of the country, and they do that by providing incentives. They do that by locating their services there. They do that by trying to encourage populations to move out of larger cities and into those regions. So Canada and Australia both have policies for diverting migrants from Sydney or Melbourne into rural or other parts of Australia. We don't do that. I mean, we do that a little bit, but not enough really. So we've got to really make a bit of a call. Do we do that? Do we try and keep people and jobs in those regions, or do we allow them to continue to contract and possibly eventually die? It's a big policy question.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it would be better for the government to actually focus on some of the even larger towns and cities and focus on getting people from smaller places to go to, say, Napier and, New Plymouth? And
nothing wrong with Napier or New Plymouth.
No, I mean, get them to go from the smaller places around those towns to some of the larger towns and cities and actually sort of boost those places up.
Yes, and I think that will happen, but Auckland is completely dominating our growth. I mean, 60% of our population growth over the next couple of decades will be in Auckland, where we are at the moment. Do you want to dampen down that growth? And I mean, the debates that you see in the media about housing or transport obviously are part of that bigger picture. We could divert more migrants from Auckland because the majority of them come to Auckland, and you could divert them into the regions, and that would help supplement population, but it will also drive economic growth in those regions because migrants contribute to demand. They produce new businesses or contribute to new businesses. They really are a very positive stimulant in terms of regions.
And actually on that topic, that I have a question is how to get migrants going to the regions from Auckland. If you take someone who's lived in India,
Yes.
they're used to a vibrant place, lots of people, lots happening, 24-hour cities.
Yes.
Are they going to want to go to a sleepy New Zealand town? This is the thing. I mean, how do we get these sorts of people to go to those sorts of places?
Well, I think there are two things. First of all, you need to incentivise them. And at the moment, the Minister has increased the points for going to a place other than Auckland from 10 to 30. So that's an incentive. But I think he needs to build around other requirements. So they need to stay there for 3 to 5 years, for example. And I think over that time, migrants would say, okay, Napier or New Plymouth, it's not a bad place. I don't have a big Indian supermarket that I could get in Auckland, or a lot of Indian restaurants, or necessarily the temple, the Sikh temple, but it's pretty good, and I'll stay there. So that's part of it. The other thing is, I think that regions need to think about, well, how do I attract immigrants and how do I keep them here? So I would challenge regions around New Zealand to say, well, what's your immigrant recruitment attraction strategy, and what do you do to keep them there? So they've got to be welcoming. They've got to say, we value your presence in our community, and this is how we value it. It might be economic, it might be social, it might be cultural.
I mean, a lot of it comes down to jobs too, doesn't it? Because I mean, that's what's going to take you there. You'll go where you have to,
Yep.
or you will want to go somewhere where you can have a good income and further your career. How do we possibly create jobs in places where there perhaps just aren't those sorts of industries or those sorts of things happening?
Yeah, and I think that's just to broaden it out for a moment, that we're going through the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, we're anticipating the work that we're doing, that 40 to 50% of the jobs that exist in 2016 will not exist in 2026. And of course, globalisation is a big player in that as well. So the growth in Auckland is understandable. It's based on service sector jobs, it's based on a big city economy, and we need that big city. So, having a vibrant, internationally connected Auckland is actually important for all of us as New Zealanders. But then how do you promote growth, jobs growth in regions? And I get very concerned about regions that are based on a small number of industries. So white gold or black gold or gold. Those are really going to go through cycles, and regions are going to go through cycles. Jobs are going to be lost. And we need a very proactive, I think, quite aggressive regional policy to address those, because those are big changes that are occurring across the world, quite apart from in New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the reality though, isn't it, with a lot of the regions. I recently lived in New Plymouth for a couple of years, and it was during a time where the dairy boom and the oil and gas boom were all go. People were coming in, there was so much positivity in the town. Within a short space of time, complete turnaround with oil and dairy prices taking a turn, and that's really hampered that place. But is that just something that we have to accept, that places that rely on those industries, it's a boom-bust type scenario? Well,
if they rely only on those industries, yes, it will be boom-bust. But the other thing is that I've challenged, in my part of the book, I've challenged people to think about what their people strategies are. And there's various bits. How does a region become age-friendly? How does a region keep its young people, for example? So those young people are going to go elsewhere for jobs or for education. So perhaps they have to go, and then you recruit them back. What are you going to do about attracting immigrants? So the economic is an important part of it, but ultimately employers will stay in regions if they've got skilled labour supply, if they've got people that they can employ, and that will in turn generate jobs in the future. So you want that cycle. You want the people to stay or people to be attracted, and you want the jobs to be generated in that region. So population will always generate demand, and you need people in that region to respond to that demand. But if the population stagnates or goes into decline, then there's a whole lot of industries, but also services that will then disappear. I mean, you need a certain number to generate demand for a hospital or a school, or and that's employment as well in those regions.
And actually, talking about increasing that population and having that as something to boot up the economy. What if the population growth is coming from lower skilled migrants? This has been an issue that's been canvassed a lot in the media recently about whether we should be opening our doors so much to low skilled migrants who are working on orchards, doing jobs which supposedly unemployed New Zealanders can do.
Yes. I mean, we've had historic high inflows of permanent migrants, over 120,000. But I think some people might have missed the fact that we've got 209,000 temporary worker arrivals in the last year. That's 30,000 more than last year. And they're providing a labour supply to a lot of industries. All of our primary sector is now increasingly reliant on that temporary labour supply. And I do get worried that supply then displaces our local communities and our local workers. But at the same time, you need those workers to have good work habits, to be wanting to work. And I noticed that the Prime Minister has been critical of some of the characteristics, the attitudes of local workers. And I have some sympathy. I mean, we operate a business in Hawke's Bay, and you do want workers who will provide you with the labour that you require. That, I think, needs to be addressed by other mechanisms. So the numbers of people in the NEET category, not in employment, education or training, of younger people is a real concern in this country. And they need to be transitioned into work and to be encouraged into work.
So do you think we should be closing the doors a wee bit on migration for a while, try and focus our energy on getting those NEETs into the lower skilled jobs, and then look to migration? Or do you think we should actually welcome more migrants, even if they are lower skilled, because at the end of the day they are numbers which are boosting the regions?
That's a complicated question, and let me try and simplify the answer. First of all, migrants are filling desperately needed shortages in New Zealand. So you wouldn't want...
That's contentious.
Yes, it is, but you could reduce the numbers arriving. So our traditional target has been a 1% net gain, which would be 47,000. At the moment, it's 69,000. So you could bring the numbers back a little bit, and that would help. Certainly, you'd still help employers, but it might help focus attention on what we need to do for locals. The question is complicated because some of the people that we're talking about have been out of the workforce in intergenerational terms. So there's a group of New Zealanders who are disconnected from the workforce in our regions, and they're stuck in our regions. So they don't have the money or the inclination or the opportunity to go somewhere else for work. And if you left that, then there are some regions that are going to experience quite significant social, quite apart from economic problems in the future.
Right, so that does, obviously, that needs to be a focus.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And, increasing migration as well?
Well, migration is only part of the answer. And if you then go to the migration option, rather than developing the local workforce option, then you're going to create further problems. So they're both part of the same issue and solution. There's a tendency politically to play them off against one another, and there's a tendency to blame immigrants, and they should not be blamed. They are responding to a demand that we have in New Zealand, and it's a credit to the New Zealand economy that they are coming to New Zealand and that we need them. So there's an upside, but we want to get that balance right, and we certainly don't want to favour immigrants in a way that then displaces or disrupts or disadvantages locals.
Do we have that balance right at the moment?
No, I think that the numbers coming into the country are high. I think the policy settings and the way in which we select immigrants nationally is pretty good. It's one of the best in the world, and I wouldn't for a moment agree with Winston Peters that we take migrants that are being rejected elsewhere. I mean, that's simply not true. But the numbers are incredibly high. They're at a historic high. We've never had numbers like we've seen in the last 2 years. So I think we could bring back the numbers a little bit, keep the policy settings. We could just increase the points value required for approval, bring back the numbers a little bit, and we'd probably be more in balance in terms of what we need to consider locally and then attracting those immigrants in to meet demand.
Sure. Okay, Paul, look, political will around making some of the changes necessary, tackling some of these issues, because there are, imbalances at the moment. What is that like, at the moment with the current government? You have mentioned the fact that these issues are quite polarising. We hear that all the time, where Andrew Little's talking about the NEETs and John Key's talking about the migrants, and none of them are putting them together.
Yes.
What's the political will like at the moment?
Well, I think the current government are very much in favour of migration, and you can see why. It's a major contributor to New Zealand's economic growth. And I think there are good population or demographic reasons why migration is important to New Zealand. However, do you begin to flatten down Auckland's growth, economic and population growth, in order to distribute that to the regions? If you're going to do that, you're going to have much stronger policy settings than we've got at the moment. So the Minister of Economic Development, Stephen Joyce, released a package a few weeks ago in Hawke's Bay. It's a pretty comprehensive package, and it's got some very ambitious targets. 5,000 additional jobs in Hawke's Bay. So quite how that will be achieved will be very interesting to see. But certainly in terms of other countries, we don't have a comprehensive regional economic package in the way that some other countries do. All countries in the OECD are facing this, so there's some quite good examples. The other challenge that I would have is to local authorities and local economic development agencies. It's been very interesting to see the way in which the local communities have rejected amalgamation, Wellington and Hawke's Bay. What they've done is they've gone, in a sense, for local democracy to the disadvantage of having an economic vision and package and leadership that would combine the whole of that region in a way that we haven't seen in many occasions in the past. So they've got to get their act together in terms of getting a vision for that region and driving that vision forward in terms of delivering on economic ambitions, economic goals and population goals in that region.
Yes, a contentious issue, really, isn't it? The amalgamation we've got. That's a whole other issue on its own. But look, Paul, we'll have to leave it there. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. No doubt we look forward to the release of your book, which includes a number of essays from various politicians and academics, all sorts of people. So we look forward to having a read.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm Janae Tibbs-Shirani at interest.co.nz.